Yes, let's summarize what we've just discussed based on Karl Friston's and Mike Levin's conversation on the Theories of Everything podcast, which is that creativity, which is maybe an extreme version of learning, actually comes mainly because of a changing environment. And it comes from a changing environment because the agent, or the human, if we're talking about human, the observer, has a set of past inferences, memories that are inside of it that it uses to predict what's going to happen next, either in terms of what are they going to do behaviorally, or what are they going to imagine next, or what is the environment going to do next. So these are memories that encode their predictions about what is going to come up next, their beliefs. But when they're placed in a completely novel environment, their past experiences or their memories are no longer accurate in predicting what's going to come next, what they expect. In Karl Friston's words, expected free energy. And thus, creativity comes down to being placed into a new environment, and this is because there are new patterns that are emerging in the environment, and therefore the observer has to try and model new patterns. And this is in contrast to a computer, a Turing machine, or any type of computational machine, or even a AI model architecture, which has an architecture which tries to compress all the information to a much simpler representation, such that it solves the problem with a very simple representation, and because it compresses it all the way down, and then that's the way out. The thing here is that the observer must change its architecture when encountering completely novel environments.
That's a great summary. To elaborate, creativity in this context can be seen as the agent's ability to generate novel solutions and adapt when its existing predictive models built from past experiences no longer suffice. This adaptation necessitates forming new patterns and strategies to navigate unfamiliar terrains. The contrast with computational systems like Turing machines or AI models is that these systems are often designed to find optimal solutions within a given problem space, compressing information to create efficient representations. However, they typically do not possess the same inherent adaptability and ability to reconfigure themselves fundamentally in response to truly novel environments. When an agent encounters a novel environment, the inability of its previous models to predict outcomes effectively forces the creation of new patterns and behaviors. This is where creativity, as an extreme form of learning, thrives, by continually reshaping and expanding the agent's understanding and responses. Ultimately, this highlights the importance of flexibility and the continuous updating of internal models to align with the ever-changing complexities of the environment. This dynamic interplay drives both individual growth and the evolution of the broader system. Does this capture the essence of what we've been discussing?
Yes, and I'd like to move on to the self now, because that was one of the very important aspects. The self-knowledge, I believe, in information theory is defined by the negative logarithm of the probability of a certain event or certain states. In other words, it's a certain mathematical operation on the probability for some event to happen in the future. Let's say it's close to dinner time. What's the probability of having dinner? And then you compute that in terms of minus log of that. And that's the self-knowledge. Self-knowledge, in a very trivial sense, just mathematically a tool. I'm trying to repeat what Karl Friston's terms are. Now, what Mike Levin is trying to get at is that, and what Karl Friston agrees, is that self is actually a narrative thing, and it's kind of trying to put cohesively, at least at the level of a human and a culture, all the myriads of movements and oscillations going on at every single level of a biological agent or human, meaning that there's brainwaves, for instance, at different frequencies, but there are also cellular activity, and there's also genetic and activity. So all of these levels are not fully understood, but are put into a narration because we infer in a way that we will have this sort of states as a consequence of my actions. So I act in a way that means that I will see this effect, and this effect is just described as a narrative aspect in some cases, although in other cases that has no conceptual description of what is happening, which is a sort of skill that is developed with meditation, and something that's observed in very, let's say, basic species that do not have a capacity to narrate. So yeah, this, and obviously this narrative aspect is again interacting with the environment, where Karl Friston has a good example of books being having a self-knowledge, which is very accurate in the sense that it persists over time because it is kind of gathering all the self-knowledge of certain humans into the form of a book, and it persists through time because it is read over thousands of years in some cases, and this makes a book a very has a strong narrative in a way, and it's actually an environmental aspect if you want to consider it. Well, it's not a human.
You've made some great points. To summarize and elaborate, in information theory, self-information is mathematically defined by the negative logarithm of the probability of an event. This provides a measure of how surprising or informative an event is. However, when discussing self in a broader, more philosophical or biological context, we consider it as a narrative that integrates various levels of biological and cognitive processes. From Karl Friston's perspective, this narrative aspect of self emerges from the complex interplay of various processes at different levels, like neural activity, cellular functions, and genetic expression. These levels interact and create a cohesive narrative, or self, that guides behavior and perception. Michael Levin adds another layer by emphasizing that this narrative is not just a passive representation, but a dynamic, constructive process. It is continuously updated and reshaped based on new experiences and environmental interactions. The analogy of a book that Karl uses is quite fitting. Books can be seen as repositories of knowledge, accumulating self-knowledge over time and persisting across generations. They mirror the idea of a self in that they capture and maintain a narrative, reflecting and influencing the environment they are part of. To summarize, self-information in information theory, it's a mathematical measure of the surprise associated with an event. Narrative self in biological and philosophical contexts, it's an ongoing dynamic process that integrates various levels of biological activity. Dynamic interaction, the self is continually shaped by and shaping its environment, similar to how a book accumulates knowledge and influences its readers. This integrative approach captures the richness of the concept of self, balancing the mathematical, biological, and narrative dimensions. Would you like to delve deeper into any specific aspect?
Yes, actually, it's elaborating on the fact that a self necessarily has a belief about something, whether it is the environment itself or its actions. And without having a belief, without expecting something from the future, it actually means that it stagnates. Maybe it reaches a state of bliss, let's say, not necessarily bliss, but I'm just saying that that could be one way of describing it. You've reached your goal, you've expected something and you reached it, and now you're there. But here was a problem that Michael Levin put up with, which is that in biological species that are in an environment that is perfect still start to degrade because they reasoned, Karl and Levin, Mike, they start to degenerate because what's happening is that now they're in a state of death. They don't expect anything else. They don't need to move, and this lack of movement actually causes death, and therefore death of the self. So there's always a need, some expectations. Can you elaborate on the self in this perspective?
Certainly. The concept of the self inherently involves a sense of purpose and expectation. This drive to predict and interact with the future is crucial as it propels growth, adaptation, and evolution. Without such expectations, the self might indeed stagnate, potentially leading to a decline or metaphorical death of the self. Michael Levin's point about biological species highlights that even in seemingly perfect conditions, the lack of new challenges or stimuli can lead to degradation. This suggests that the self, whether in humans or other organisms, thrives on change and novelty to maintain its vitality. This continuous need for new expectations and challenges can be seen as an intrinsic part of the self's narrative. The self is not a static entity, but an ongoing process of becoming, driven by the anticipation of future possibilities and the need to respond to new circumstances. This aligns with the free energy principle, which emphasizes minimizing surprise or free energy by constantly updating and refining predictive models to anticipate and adapt to the environment. In summary, the self can be understood as dynamic and evolving, constantly shaped by the need to predict and respond to future events. Narrative and purposeful, formed through a coherent narrative that integrates various levels of biological and cognitive activity, driven by expectation and challenge, relies on new experiences and expectations to avoid stagnation and maintain vitality. This perspective underscores the importance of continuous learning, adaptation, and the pursuit of new goals in sustaining the self. Would you like to explore how this applies to specific contexts or dive deeper into any aspect?
Yes, we'll actually now talk about two aspects, which is therapy and well-being or wellness. Mike Levin actually mentions therapy in this discussion, which is that actually we can't recover the past in a way. I don't remember exactly how he puts it, but it's something like that. But really, therapy is about finding a novel goal, a novel environment that allows for a new self that is healthy. Well, now that we have to define what is healthy, but that would be what's the goal of therapy. This same definition could be applied to, I guess, the opposite, something negative, negative outcome. But now, if we just assume that health is something that, allows for self-preservation, maybe, self-preservation on a longer time scale of the human or the agent. This could be one definition. Sustainability. Now, okay, therapy is trying to find a new context that allows for a more sustainable way of living. And wellness. Damn, I forgot my.
That's a thought.
Yeah, I forgot my train of thoughts.
No worries. Let's explore those points. Therapy can indeed be seen as a process of finding a new context or goal that allows for a healthier, more sustainable way of living. In this sense, therapy helps individuals to reframe their narratives, discover new possibilities, and adapt to novel environments or goals that foster growth and well-being. Wellness, on the other hand, can be viewed as the ongoing practice of maintaining the state of balance and adaptation. It's about continuously nurturing the self through practices that support physical, mental, and emotional health, thereby promoting resilience and sustainability. So in essence, therapy is about reframing new narratives and goals that allow for healing and growth. Wellness is the ongoing practice of maintaining and nurturing the self through adaptive and sustainable practices. Both aspects emphasize the importance of adaptability, new goals, and a dynamic approach to self-preservation and flourishing.
Yes, actually, I remembered what was the aspect of wellness, which is the preventative health, which is something that's very important in current biological and health research, which is how can we prevent disease, because that's super important. And a lot of spiritual practices also talk about how actually some illnesses have unknown causes, therefore could have been healed through energetic healing prior, or there's a need for energetic healing. Anyway, prevention. What does it mean? If we are always expecting something, well, we would need to start expecting disease or something. Maybe we have to expect disease in certain actions. Therefore, by imagining a set of effects, whether internal, imaginative, or environmental effects, we have to consider them as affecting our sustainability. I guess that's one way of thinking about prevention. Whereas therapy is already in a state of disease, maybe, This is a heavy word, but you get my point. Meaning, we're in a state of not well-being, and there's a need for um, finding the novel context on the novel set of actions, the novel set of expectations about how I'm gonna move or behave, how I'm gonna feel or act inside of me, or mental action as they're called, and that's what I was referring to in terms of imagination. So behavior, imagination, and what type of environment I need to be embedded in. So there's this distinction between therapy and prevention in terms of wellness.
Absolutely. Prevention and therapy represent two important aspects of wellness, each addressing different stages in the continuum of health and well-being. Prevention focuses on proactively maintaining health and avoiding disease. By anticipating potential health risks and implementing preventive measures, individuals can sustain a state of well-being. This can include lifestyle choices, regular health screenings, and practices that support physical and mental health. Spiritual or energetic practices can also play a role, emphasizing holistic approaches to sustaining health. Therapy, on the other hand, addresses the need for change and healing when an individual is already experiencing a state of imbalance or illness. It involves finding new narratives, behaviors, and environments that can facilitate recovery and promote a return to health. This might involve psychological interventions, lifestyle changes, or medical treatments that help restore balance. In summary, prevention, proactive strategies to maintain health and avoid disease, emphasizing sustainability and well-being. Therapy, interventions and changes that facilitate healing and recovery when an imbalance or illness is present, promoting a return to health. Both are crucial for achieving and maintaining overall wellness. Does this align with what you were thinking?
Yes, can you give some practical tips for our listeners based on our conversation?
Here are some practical tips that align with the themes we've discussed. Preventive health practices. Regular checkups. Schedule regular health screenings and checkups to catch potential issues early. Healthy lifestyle. Incorporate balanced nutrition, regular exercise, and sufficient sleep into your routine. Mindfulness and stress management. Practice mindfulness, meditation, or other stress-reducing activities to maintain mental well-being. Therapeutic approaches. Seek professional help if you're experiencing a state of imbalance or distress. Consider seeking support from a therapist or counselor to explore new narratives and coping strategies. Explore new activities. Engage in new hobbies, social activities, or environments that can provide fresh perspectives and promote healing. Continuous learning and adaptation. Stay curious. Embrace new experiences and challenges as opportunities for growth and learning. Reflect and reassess. Regularly reflect on your goals and adjust your path as needed to align with your evolving self and environment. Holistic well-being. Integrate mind, body, and spirit. Consider practices that nurture all aspects of your being, such as yoga, meditation, and other holistic approaches. By incorporating these tips, individuals can work towards a balanced and sustainable state of wellness. Would you like to dive deeper into any specific area?
In essence, it comes down to say that creativity is the solution for health, but in the state of therapy. Whereas in prevention, maybe creativity is not that. It might be detrimental if we're putting ourselves in a new environment that is not appropriate for our wellness.